Hey guys, my third recommended book is on the subject of nutrition and exercise, and it's called The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance. The ketogenic diet is getting really popular these days, and one group of people who could benefit are endurance athletes. This book explains in detail all the considerations to be made to optimize performance while staying on a low carb diet. The idea is to drop your carbohydrates to a very low level and allow your body to become more efficient at burning fat as a fuel source. This is known as becoming fat adapted. Carbohydrate is your body's preferred energy source, so on a moderate to high carb diet it develops a reliance on that, and then exercise performance is really going to suffer when your carbohydrate levels are low. You can store about 2,000 calories of carbohydrates in your muscles and liver, and that's good enough to run about 15 to 20 miles. So for a marathon runner or other endurance athletes like a triathlete, they usually rely on these sports gels and sports drinks to make up the calorie difference and allow them to finish the race. In contrast, 1 kilogram of body fat stores almost 8,000 calories, and even the leanest athlete is going to have several kilos of body fat at their disposal. That means if we can teach our body to use fat as fuel, we can go for longer in training or in competition without relying on these sports drinks and sports gels to get us to the finish line. For anyone who does more short, intense exercise, then becoming fat adapted is probably more trouble than it's worth. That's because at these higher intensities, performance is still optimized by using carbohydrates. 3 bullet points from the book. Firstly, there is a danger zone between roughly 50 and 150 grams of carbohydrates per day. Your brain is 2% of your body weight, but it can burn around 20% of your total calories, and it likes to use glucose from carbohydrate to do so. 20% of your calories works out at 100 to 125 grams of carbohydrate per day that your brain needs, and that could be more if you have a lot of intense focus and concentration. Now, your brain can rely on ketones derived from fat, but to do this it has to become fat adapted by spending a period of time at below 50 grams of carbohydrate a day. So in this middle ground, the danger zone, you've got too many carbohydrates for the ketones to kick in, but if you're below 125, 150, then it's insufficient to fuel your brain from glucose alone. I personally found this very useful because when I used to try and fat adapt, I would drop my carbohydrates gradually, so I'd go 50 to 150, then down to 100, and those several days at 100 I just felt awful and I would give up and binge eat before I managed to get to that magical under 50 grams of carbs a day. Secondly, the percentage of fat burned compared to total calories is something you can actually improve. For the average person it might look something like this, with carbs becoming the dominant source above 50 to 55% exercise intensity. Remember that in absolute terms, the higher intensity will burn more calories, so it makes more sense to look at a graph like this. Here you can see fat burning peaks at 5 calories per minute, which is 300 calories of fat an hour and equates to 33 grams. If you look on the left side here, you can see similar results with the group average hitting a peak of 28 grams of fat per hour. Athletes who became fat adapted, labelled here as keto adapted, were able to achieve on average 90 grams of fat burned per hour, and that was measured at 64% of VO2 max. It's a bit misleading to say it's tripled because these were untrained subjects, so their overall calorie burning ability is lower than trained cyclists, but it shows what's possible. This illustrates why fat adaptation can be good for endurance athletes because the majority of their race is at that sub-maximal intensity where they can tap into their fat reserves. Finally, it can take 6 to 8 weeks to become fully fat adapted and for exercise performance to return to normal. In the research, you might see one group put on a ketogenic diet. Unfortunately, most of the time that isn't a long enough study for it to be a fair comparison. The study might only be 4 weeks long, so the participants are still in this transition phase, and so exercise performance and mental clarity are going to suffer. All you're really testing here is what happens when you take away someone's main fuel source and before they've learned how to use an alternative, which is obviously going to be worse. These studies are often quoted by people looking to discredit the ketogenic diet for athletes or the general population. When they become fat adapted, some athletes like to train low and compete high. That means a low carbohydrate intake while they're training. That's going to maximize fat burning efficiency. Then when it comes to competition, they're going to use carbohydrates so they can tap into those higher intensity levels while still using a greater percentage of fat at the lower intensity levels. You can find notes on this and other recommended books over at 9to5strength.com/books. Thanks for watching.